welcome back to The Explainer. You know, we're always hearing about how technology is flipping fields like medicine or engineering on their head. But what happens when that same tech transforms one of our oldest crafts, the art of understanding the past? Today, we're diving into how the digital age is completely rewriting the job description for historians.
So let's start with a classic idea. The famous historian Mark Bloch once said, "History is the science of men in time." Now, for generations, that meant one thing, a very physical, hands-on job, working with the actual, tangible stuff left behind by the past.
And that workshop? Well, it's changing, and fast. The old world of dusty archives and fading ink, that's being replaced by global servers and just an endless river of data. The classic magnifying glass is giving way to powerful algorithms. And this isn't just some minor tool upgrade, you guys. It's a fundamental revolution in the craft itself. To really get a handle on how big this revolution is, we first have to appreciate what it's replacing. So, let's take a step back into the world of the analog historian. In that traditional world, a historian's work was, at its heart, tactile. It was a physical craft, you know? It relied on all sorts of sensory information that went way beyond just the words written on a page. What that means is historians weren't just readers, they were more like detectives. They'd feel the texture of paper to date it, or they'd examine the ink in a signature to see if it was a forgery. They had to understand the importance of where a document was filed in an archive box. The whole search for truth was this slow, methodical journey through libraries, chasing one footnote to the next book. And then, well, everything changed. We entered what you could call a digital deluge. The biggest problem for historians in the past was always the scarcity of sources. Now, that problem has been completely flipped on its head. Today, the challenge is an overwhelming, crushing abundance of information. Just think about the new power they have. With digital tools, a historian can download and classify 2,000 19th century newspaper articles in a single day. Now, to put that in perspective, doing that the old-fashioned way, that could easily take an entire year. The jump in scale is just, well, it's mind-boggling. But here's the twist. This incredible power, this speed and scale, it creates a really profound new problem. We've gained all this efficiency, for sure, but have we lost something absolutely essential along the way? Which brings us to a really critical question. Is a perfect digital copy, I'm talking a super high-resolution scan of an old letter, is it really the same as holding that original artifact in your own two hands? And the answer, it seems, is a hard no. When we digitize something, we lose the feel of the paper, the smell of an old book, all that physical context. Plus, we introduce all new problems. A broken hyperlink is basically the digital version of a library burning down. And how can you really trust where a file came from when it's been copied and maybe even altered 1,000 times? This whole set of challenges, this crisis, actually has a name. Scholars call it the epistemic passage, and it really gets at a crisis in how we know what we think we know about the past. Okay, let's break that down. Epistemic is just a fancy word that has to do with knowledge, how we know things. So the epistemic passage is all about this massive shift in how historians check their sources, how they interpret evidence, and how they build their stories. It's not just a change in tools, you see. It's a change in the fundamental rules of the game. And as you can probably guess, this creates some serious tension. It's become a conflict that's both generational and professional. You've got one side, with historians whose entire craft is built on the physical archive. And then on the other, you have a new generation that thinks in terms of data, databases, and algorithms. It's turned into a real debate about the very soul of the profession. So, where does all this leave us? What does the historian of tomorrow actually look like? What's the new craft of digital history? Well, for starters, the very language of history is evolving to navigate this new world. So where a historian used to talk about provenance or a document's origin, they now analyze its metadata. The grammage or thickness of paper gives way to file resolution. An archive box becomes a database query. And yeah, the good old footnote is reborn as the hyperlink.
It's a whole new vocabulary for a whole new era.
And this new vocabulary helps power a new kind of hybrid workflow. It still begins with a human asking a question. And then after the data is mined and crunched, look at step 3, critiquing the source in both its digital and its original analog form. But maybe the most crucial step here is number 4, interpreting all of it with imagination. That's the one thing an algorithm just can't do. Before you share what you found back out into the digital world.
So, in the end, the real goal here is synthesis. This isn't about the digital world wiping out the analog one. The historian of the future won't pick one over the other. No, they're going to be a bridge builder, using the strengths of both worlds to paint a much richer, more complete picture of our past.
And you know what's incredible? People saw this coming decades ago. Listen to this. It's an unbelievably insightful quote from the 1960s by a French historian, Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie. He predicted, "The historian of tomorrow will be a programmer, if not, they will not be." I mean, can you believe that? He saw way ahead of his time that just managing information would become every bit as important as reading it.
Which leaves us all with one final, and I think really important question. As we make our way through this epistemic passage, and as history itself becomes code and databases and algorithms, how do we make sure that we're still telling the rich, the complicated, and the deeply human stories of our past? Thanks for watching The Explainer.